Hello everybody, welcome back to Screenstars. I'm here today to bring you another classic James Bond review. Today I'm taking a look at the 1999 Bond film, The World Is Not Enough. The film is directed by Michael Apted and it stars Pierce Brosnan, Sophie Marcoux, Robert Carlyle, Denise Richards, Robbie Coltrane and Judi Dench. This time round, Bond is sent to protect Sophie Marcoux's character, an oil heiress, Electra King, who was targeted by terrorists, kidnapped. She managed to escape, and Bond is sent to kind of personally protect her, but uncovers like a nuclear plot by Robert Carlyle's evil Renard. But in actual fact, the real villain of the piece is much closer to home. Right, what are my thoughts on The World Is Not Enough? I've always been quite a big fan of this one. I know it gets quite a lot of flack, and I will go into some of those reasons and stuff. But I do have a little bit of a soft spot for this one. I like the idea of this one. I thought it had some classic Bond moments in it. And, you know, I remember when I watched this at the time, coming out of the cinema, being really quite happy with it. And I thought it was an improvement on the last one, Tomorrow Never Dies, which, you know, has never really been a huge favourite of mine, Tomorrow Never Dies, but after watching it and reviewing it for the channel, I thought, you know, in fairness, it was a fairly solid outing. If anything, I think this is probably aged fairly poorly, and it's got enough flaws and faults with it to kind of be, I suppose, a bit of a disappointment now for me from what I remember when I watched it the first couple of times, you know, when it first came out and stuff. And I think there are quite a few reasons for that. I think it kind of does a lot of the action early in the film, and some of the action that it does give feels quite forced. For example, you know, the action scene where Electra and Bond are attacked on that ski slope sort of thing, that feels incredibly forced. Some of the other action scenes, especially when he goes after Robbie Coltrane's character and then the bad guys just kind of, turn up. It just feels quite, I don't know, by the numbers at times, this film. But saying that, it does still have some strong moments. Like I say, I think the whole opening sequence is excellent, and it's probably one of the longest, if not the longest, opening sequence before you get title credits. It goes on for a long, long time, and there's, you know, it's got the Millennium Dome as a big central piece. I remember that being a big talking point in, you know, the media and the newspapers at the time. You know, this Millennium Dome that was being built in London to celebrate, obviously, the millennium, strangely. You know, a lot of the public felt it was a massive waste of money. So to kind of put it in a Bond film front and centre, I suppose, gave it a little bit of legitimacy. And it was a spectacular opening sequence. There's no two ways of getting about it. Beyond that, a lot of the action, I don't know, feels, like I say, forced or not overly exciting. And the end of the film, I think, is pretty poor. You know, the whole submarine thing, I thought was, well, just dull. And then we come on to what I think many people would agree is probably one of the worst Bond girls of all time, Denise Richards, Dr. Christmas Jones. Now, look, nobody's going to deny that Denise Richards is absolutely drop-dead gorgeous in this film. I mean, absolutely jaw-droppingly beautiful. But there's nobody going to believe that she's a nuclear scientist. And what they were thinking God only knows. Um, Putting her in this film with that kind of position. I mean, I think she even got a Razzie, didn't she, for like the worst supporting actress of the year or something like that. It just didn't work, and there was zero chemistry between her and Brosnan. But then the other side of that coin is you've got Sophie Marcoux, who is one of the best Bond girls, in my opinion. Well, certainly one of the strongest of recent memory. And she actually turns out to be not just a great Bond girl, but a great villain too. Played brilliantly, I think, by Sophie Marcoux. Um, Great job. I remember I didn't see that coming. You know, the turn of her being a villain. Um, and when I first watched the film, and I thought it was a clever piece of cinema, really. And then you got Robert Carlyle's Renard. Again, I think huge potential for him to be a great villain here, and I don't think they necessarily capitalised on it in this film. I mean, you've got this terrorist who's got a bullet lodge in his head, so he basically can't feel any pain, and you know he's got nothing to live for really. And I think they could probably have done a lot more with his villainous character. As it turns out, they did just enough, if you like, to make him reasonably memorable. But I think they could have made him iconic, in my opinion. It's nice to see M get more involved in this one, Judi Dench's M. I always like it when she got involved in the Bond films, which she did a lot more of in the Daniel Craig ones, obviously. And the film was ridiculously successful, made absolutely mountains of money, even though it's probably never going to crack anybody's top 10 list of the best Bond films ever. It's got good moments, it's got bad moments, it's got some decent, memorable Bond moments, but it's got a lot of forgettable ones as well. And I just think they make some reasonably poor choices here. You know what I mean? Like I said, Denise Richards as this Bond girl, John Cleese terribly miscast as this new Q, or R as it goes on to be known in the credits, I think. And it just, for me, I don't know. It just felt it felt a little bit. Almost like paint by numbers Bond. You know, it's almost like it was low effort in the sense of trying to get, you know, the excitement going, trying to get a really interesting story going. And I think at the very core of the film, they had a very interesting story here. You know, the Sophie Marcoux story of her getting Stockholm syndrome and, you know, falling for Renard's character and the whole betrayal of her. And I think if they'd have focused on that more, and they could have really got a lot more out of that story and turned it into a real thriller of a film, this, with some really high-octane action scenes thrown in there. I think it almost felt like they were kind of putting a bit of a like sewing bits of Bond together to try and make a film that kind of worked. And bits of it did, bits of it didn't. So I thought it was a bit patchy, this one. Again, I can't really fault Pierce Brosnan as Bond here. Again, he's very comfortable in the role, does a great job. Judi Dench is fantastic as M. Robbie Coltrane, it was nice to see his character return. And, you know, it was wonderful to see Desmond Llewellyn one last time as Q. Now, even though the film suggests that this was going to be his last one, because he, you know, Bond says to him, "You're not going to retire, are you yet, Q?" And that would suggest that he was going to retire because he was passing it over to John Cleese's character. In actual fact, he wasn't. He was planning to return for the next Bond, but unfortunately, he died in a car crash shortly after this film came out. So, very, very sad, and rest in peace, Desmond. He was that constant thread throughout all the Bond films, the majority of them, as Q. And he's obviously a legendary name associated with the Bond franchise. So, yeah, My next review will always, of course, be Die Another Day, the final outing for Brosnan. So looking forward to checking that one out. Let me know your thoughts in the comments on this film, on that film, and I will, of course, see you on the next review.